one.
All right, we will call this meeting back to order at 5:40 p.m. And we will be moving on to the Clean Energy Improvement Program, the CEIP report, presented by Mr. Rousseau.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity through the committee to share with you a little bit about the Clean Energy Program, which we call in short CEIP. Previously in 2019, there was a motion that was made for us to look into it. So a resolution was made and there was no background in terms of adopting a program. So what we did in conjunction with our finance department and my little team, we attended a webinar just to get up to speed where the program is at, what is offered. Some things that we discovered was that FCM used to provide some funding to help us get started. That is now hard to find or come by. And we were told that it likely will not be successful if we apply for it because certain jurisdictions have been oversubscribed. And so it's not even worth trying. That's basically what we heard on the webinar. That being said, what is the Clean Energy Improvement Program? It's really a program that helps us to be good stewards in terms of environmental practices, i.e. if you have an individual home that you own and you're paying taxes, of course, on that home, you can do the improvements through the municipality funding that program. So basically, the municipality will put up X value, invite folks to participate in a program of this nature where they can replace their furnace, get the most up-to-date furnace or any cooling heating systems, doors, windows, those type of things. It is not for refrigerators and stoves. That's excluded from this program. So how this program works is that the municipality would put up certain amount of funds, which apparently does not impact our debt limit. So yes, it is still funds that would come from a certain source, be it reserves or be it a certain other aspect or pocket of money that you may have. However, it is tied not to the property owners. It is tied to the property itself. So what that means is that if you own a property in Hinton, you do these improvements, and 3 years later, you're selling it and you have a 20-year loan with the town, that gets taken over and assumed by the new owner. How the program works is that the Alberta municipalities has been made the custodian of this program through a ministerial order of the province of Alberta. So what they do is that they would assist the town to start the program, understand that you need to get through a bylaw first that would get going. So once you have your bylaw approved that you want to be a CEIP provider, they will then come in and help us with the marketing, the structure to be put forward, how the finance department will administer this. And if you go through the presentation that is attached, it comes directly from Alberta municipalities, you will note some of the municipalities that's going through the interest phase, others are going through the bylaw phase, and some that has gone through the gate and completely administering it right now. So if you really look at the cross section of municipalities that are already through the gates, it's not that many, but it shows that the interest is growing. This is a good program where you could help your residents to get to a certain level of improvements to their home, especially if you have older stock homes and then have to replace a furnace. This is the time to do it with a proper type of furnace that would qualify for this type of thing. There's a $50,000 cap per household. Now that doesn't mean if the town of Hinton adopts this, that you have to go to 50,000. You could say, we want to cap it at 35,000. Now, as we well know that we have about 2,667 residential homes. And I should preface this, that we did not bring forward the recommendation for any commercial so far. The advice we got from Alberta municipalities on that webinar, start with your residential first. Then you can get the processes right. You can get your internal sort of alignment correct in terms of resources and all those. And I'll get to resources in a minute. So as an example, if you look in the report, if you just take 1% intake, that's 26 properties in Hinton up at an amount of 35,000, means that the town of Hinton will have to put forward 910,000 allocation so that we can support this. How this works is that we would not pay the contractor directly. This money would go to Alberta municipalities and they will pay the contractors. And the reason that is done this way is that they would do certain checks and balances to make sure that and all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and those type of things. They'll also train our local contractors. So there's a job creation opportunity where if a contractor says, I'd like to be part of this, but I don't know how it works. That is where Alberta municipalities would help with the training based on the runway of experience. That being said, there's also a fee that we pay at up to 15,000, and for commercial it will be greater. I think it's 1% of whatever the capital expenditure is. So 15,000 is what the administrative cost is that we would pay Alberta municipalities to administer this on our behalf and to support our finance department, who would squarely be responsible for this. You would see that, as I said, I worked with Ms. Barber on this, that there's probably a full-time FTE that will need, if you want to administer this. Now, we're not saying it must be this. Right now, I can't speak for our finance department in terms of how busy they are, what their commitments are, but this program will require, somebody says, okay, the CEIP program is approved by council as an example. What do I need to do to qualify? There's a qualifying. It's almost like you have to go through a credit check, if I may put it that way. You've got to qualify, and yes, you can afford this. And you'll also see what the impact is. If you go with a 10-year, 35-year loan, the additional cost, it's about just under $200 per year that would add to your tax bill. If you go over 15 years, it becomes $1,676. So and the monies that we take back in 10 years is only 57,700. So you get your monies are coming back slowly, but it's an investment in leadership in energy efficiency that you're really doing and helping our community. At this point, I want to stop. I'm sure council has read and looked at the proposal, and I'm open to this with my colleagues to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rousseau. Council, do you have any questions, any points of discussion, or any Councillor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Russo, did you say that the program was oversubscribed?
Through to the chair, to Councillor Race. What we have been told is that FCM is not extending additional funding. And so the word oversubscribed is probably very strongly put, but that's what we heard through the conversations on July the 17th, where we went through the webinar.
Okay, so, during my research of all this, I did get a hold of Alberta municipalities, and they were saying that FCM put this program out to all of Canada, and Alberta jumped on it like you wouldn't believe. So they're saying no more funding to Alberta, and that was a couple months ago. They said no more funding. So I was really disheartened that we missed the boat on this, because I know a lot of our citizens would certainly benefit by it. But I want to ask, in all the municipalities that I've talked to, they've said that the administration of this program is very minimal. The application process is quite easy. Any bylaws that would have to be written, 20 other municipalities have written them, and we could grab one of them. So why the need for a full-time person taking care of this?
Through to the chair, if I may, Mr. Chair, if I may turn that over to Ms. Bobo because it's her department.
Thank you, and I'll gladly answer the question through the chair to all committee. The one FTE was to ensure that we were representing this program correctly. Throughout the presentation that we received from AB Munis, they continually talked about having your team in place to administer and all the facets of it. So when we went through this exercise with the strategic projects team, the last thing we wanted was to implement a program that we were not ready to administer from the front of our desks rather than off the side of our desks. And my fear was, with current capacity in the department, to have a program of this much importance come forward with a lot of legal documents and contracts and making sure that the financial ratios are always checked and balanced, that we needed someone that would have that lens at the forefront of their day rather than when I get around to doing it towards the end of the afternoon type of. We have seen some other programs that have come through that there was a bit of stumbling at the start because we weren't quite ready with the staffing. And I just wanted to avoid that. So my estimation of one FTE was just to give the program the courtesy and the benefit that it needed.
So where my concern was, one municipality that I talked to, their economic development person took this on. Another municipality, their assistant CAO took it on. At minimal time they had to work at it. So I do have a question for CAO.
Councillor Ostash, I'm actually gonna put you back in queue. I have two other
Certainly.
councillors.
Yep, certainly.
Councillor Haas, you're up next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Putting aside the staffing, I think my biggest thing is the fact that it comes from our reserves, it's funded through our reserves, and how slowly that would come back to us, that would then alter our future capital plans. I think, and I guess my curiosity, when we say FCM funded this and it was overprescribed in Alberta and now there's no more funding for Alberta, but what exactly was FCM funding? Like, are other municipalities tying up their reserves in the same way, or what would the Alberta FCM be funding?
Edmund?
Due to the chair to Councillor Haas, it was more the upfront sort of understanding of what we need to do to get it going. It wasn't the administering of it.
Right.
So it would have been like a seed fund to get going. So it's not writing the bylaw, because that would have been done internally.
Right.
Councillor Race is correct. There are many examples of bylaws. It's not that we are starting it from scratch, but it was purely seed funding to get going. Where does the other municipalities get their funds from? We were told ATB as a lender was one of it. We as the town could adjust the interest rate if we so wish to charge interest on the loan. And so they got it from various pockets. Some partially funded it from reserves, others from a line of credit. So there's various ways that they did. One of the things, of course, as you correctly said, Councillor Haas, is that it would sort of be part of your bigger discussion when it comes to competing for other projects and prioritizing the timing of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I may, if this would have been something down the road we could have planned for, had a fund specifically reserved for, but we haven't, and to go ahead now and, say that we want to apply this, and then, the amount of reserve funds that could tie up and get, getting our those funds back into reserve. That's the major concern for me, personally, with this program. I think it's great. I think it's an opportunity, but I just don't see we're set up for that at this time. I think that's something for the future anyway, if we wanted to have that conversation. So that's where I'm at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Ostasher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the recommended action direction, please. If I could speak to it.
Please.
I'm in favor of accepting this for information that can get put on the shelf, and at some point in the future, if there's a huge demand to use taxpayer funds, whether through reserves or taxation or whatever, to fund a program like this, okay, I would much rather prefer that funding come from another source. So I think this would be a great opportunity for the federal government to fund something like this through the carbon tax that they collect. I don't think it's fair to utilize taxpayer dollars to implement a clean energy improvement program. So anyway, from my perspective, I don't feel we have the current administrative capacity or financial capacity to take this on. So I am willing to accept it for information though, and if at some point in the future it becomes viable for one reason or another, we can jump right back in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. I have Councillor Race, then the mayor.
Thank you very much. So, we do have 3 municipalities in Alberta who are going to be doing this on their dime. We have Athabasca, we have Stettler, and we have a little village of Sterling. So how hard is it to bring this back? I support what Alberta is saying about taking this as information, but how hard will it be to bring this back to a meeting?
CAO?
Through the chair, this would simply be a direction of council, either through one of the regular council meeting, a committee of the whole, or even as a part of, strategic planning session. So either one of those three avenues for council, but that I believe that would likely be dictated by council and by council will to bring it back.
Mr. Chair, I do have one quick question, if I may.
Yes,
So
please.
in regards to FCM, it's my understanding that FCM, they give this money to the municipality, let's say at an interest rate of 2%. And then we, as a municipality, we would charge the applicant 4% in doing this. So, Mr. Russo, have you heard if, like next year, if FCM is going to bring this program back to Alberta? Because we certainly are utilizing it.
To the chair, to Councillor Rice, the message we got at the webinar was that it's a huge uncertainty whether the funds will be allocated in 2025. So the short answer would be, it is very uncertain whether we will even see this being fulfilled in terms of funding. So it's uncertain.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, and through the chair to committee, I'm generally in support of accepting this report for information. I think it is unfortunate that the program setup funding has dried up. I've heard a little bit about from councillors discussing the costs to the municipality, and this program, as it was originally conceived, was really not meant to have any cost to the municipality. There's systems in place where we could borrow the money and not have it go against our debt limit. We could use reserves and bring in a little bit more revenue for it, but unfortunately with our staffing, putting us over the threshold where we'd have to increase an FTE to be able to support this program, it's just not in the cards for, I think, the town of Hinton at this moment, and I would like to see it go on the shelf, but I'd like for us to keep an eye on this. And if the fully funded program does come back, I think it is something we can look at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on the direction on the floor? Seeing none, I will call to question by reading it. That committee received the Clean Energy Improvement Program CEIP report for information. Council, if you could please vote now. And that is carried unanimously, 5 in favor. Council, any further discussion or direction stemming from this action item? Councilor Stafford?
Not related, but, Councilor Chambers has left the meeting. Is David Campbell know that she left and reported the time?
She has.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
I'll make a check.
No, much appreciated. Mr. Mayor? For the next one? Okay. Then we will move on to the council procedure bylaw number 1153 review. And Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, and we could let administration do a little bit of a report on this, but this really does come from the council procedure bylaw review committee. Councillor Magoon, myself, and administration have been working hard on getting the full report from our parliamentarian into a draft bylaw, but we've run into a couple of questions that we feel needed to come to the full committee here. And the first one being the time limit for minute with council. It's specifically what we're most interested in getting the feedback from council for. And that's in the sort of the first recommended action. The second recommended action, the time limits for presentations and delegations. That's another point that the procedure review bylaw review committee would like to have council's sort of sense on where we'd like to go there. And then the other two, the quorum in 15 minutes and the request to bring the whole thing back to a future committee of the whole meeting. I don't think we actually need any feedback on either of those items this evening. the 15 minutes is included. It was a question we asked the parliamentarian about our, if we don't have quorum, how does that work? And the response is in this report, if anyone else has that specific question. But the points we'd like to see discussed this evening, specifically minute with council, and then the delegation times. Speaking towards the minute with council item, as we can see on page 2 of our report here, we do have the questions given out to our parliamentarian, and a little bit of the answer is the effectiveness of minute with council segment is debatable. It is argued that this method is less productive compared to delegations, which require pre-submitted information and ensure better control over the meeting's conduct. I just wanted, for the purpose of this meeting with council, to point out that administration did temper down the wording of our parliamentarian in that report. Our parliamentarian is very opposed to the minute with council item, and has said it's being removed from a number of other communities' procedure bylaws. And that is my update on this item. Let's have discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will start with Councillor Ostashik, please.
Mr. Chair, for the benefit of the committee members, council members who aren't part of the procedure bylaw review committee, can you elaborate on some of the concerns that parliamentarian had around minute with council?
Yes. So and the only discussion that we've had as a committee with the parliamentarian is through written communications. Effectively, he says this is simply not a productive tool to allow the public to participate in council meetings. And it's because of how it's interrupting in the agenda. So with our procedures, we have a very rigid and structured council meeting procedure. And with the minute with council, it gives people who are not versed in the procedure, not versed in the norms of council, an opportunity to take the floor, but it also does it in a way that's not particularly structured. So we could have a meeting, say today we had no minute with council, we could have 45 minutes worth of minute with council, and we have no way of knowing beforehand, which from the parliamentarian standpoint, I think they typically don't like to have those sort of open-ended items on an agenda. It's the same feedback he actually put forward on our delegations, where our standard practice has been to allow on the agenda different amounts of time for the delegations. And his recommendation was we go to a strict 10 minutes and have the procedure where council give additional time in a rigid, structured way. And that comes right out of the follow-up on the conversation about the minute with council piece. I hope that answers the question as best I could, anyways.
Councillor Ostashik, did you follow
Can I
up?
follow up?
Please, yeah,
No, actually, I'm good for that.
okay. Councillor Haas?
I just have a question on as we proceed, because I know there's the recommendations, but is there also an opportunity to ask questions of the committee and administration on other matters as well? In this as well?
Oh, I see absolutely no reason not to.
Okay.
The committee really wants to know council's opinion of minute with council. Do we want to keep it? And if we want to keep it, then we need to determine it.
Gotcha, but there are other matters I can bring up later or what? Okay,
Yes, please.
right.
CAO?
Through the chair, members of council, just, for the intent of today, we were hoping to keep it to these few matters, but we do actually intend on, at the next meeting, bringing the parliamentarian to be able to answer more, some more questions on all these other items. We don't intend on getting through these other items, but we will have we'll have ample opportunity for council to ask questions on all the other items as well, but I think today was looking more specifically at those few items.
Mr. Mayor?
And if I may, for the list of items the parliamentarians recommended, I had expected to see a redlined draft of the bylaw there. We've already applied the vast majority of those items, but specifically today it's met with council that we just couldn't decide as a committee what the right answer to bring back in the official version will be.
Okay. Councillor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are there any other recommendations that the procedure bylaw review committee has regarding minute with council in terms of pre-registering, having to divulge the topic that you want to talk about beforehand, much like a delegation, but shorter time frame.
I think, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just speaking to that, and it is included in the report. The one that we kept coming back to was some tool, and the recommendation was like a clock with, basically a dead mic sort of kill switch. Where it's like, yeah, you have your 60 seconds, it'll go, it's visual, everybody can see it, and when the time is out, your mic is shut off and that's it, you're done, we move on to someone else. That was, I think, one of the tools that we discussed. And sort of kept circling back to. Mr. Mayor, did you wanna?
Thank you, and the other parts are the parts that we've already been trying, so we've got the procedure written down in our agenda a little bit. We speak about what minute with council is for, right beforehand. The next recommendation would be to solidify those in our procedure bylaw and add a hard timer in seconds, so 60 seconds, 120 seconds. With the procedure that the timer is visible when the time's done. That's it.
Councillor Rostashik, did you have a follow-up?
Good for now.
Okay. Councillor Haas?
So based on this and hearing from the mayor in regards to what parliamentarian has stated, is the committee's intent to recommend that we keep minute with council based, or because we've done it, but to tighten it up? Or, because I kind of noticed that's not one of the options, is to remove it based on the parliamentary recommendation. So I'm assuming that's what this tonight is about potentially, but I'm just curious on the thoughts of the committee on the future of this minute with council.
Mr. Mayor?
So that's exactly what the procedure bylaw review committee is looking for, is it the will of council to keep minute with council in our procedure bylaw or to remove it? If the answer is to keep, then is it 60 seconds, is it 120 seconds, or a different amount? Or is there some other action that council would like to see taken to rein in our minute with council from what it's been in the past, although recently it hasn't been a problem at all?
Councillor Haas, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, if I may, just on the matter, I'm kind of torn with this one, because I do think it has some ability for members of the community to come forward and share some of those things that are happening in the community and things like that. I know sometimes, we get things that people are not happy with, but I do look at the different ways that could be shared, whether it's through email, whether it's through hit listen. So we have a lot of different avenues in a lot of other ways that things could be shared. Maybe it's a look at too, is to, instead of is replacing minute with council as a way of, maybe there's a something that can be put on our agenda ahead of time that is then can be read out by the mayor if there's an initiative happening or something. Like, I just see there are some benefits, but then I hear what the parliamentarian is saying, and it isn't very productive. It's not, in some ways. So, I'm curious on what the rest of the council or committee feels on this one. It's a practice we've done for a long time, it would be a change, so.
But I have myself in queue next, and to speak to that, and I think that's really circling back to the conversations we had. We didn't want to chase something down a rabbit hole to come back to the full council and find out this is a big item, we got it wrong. For myself, I think generally in principle, I'd be more in favor of having a tool that's fair and transparent. That, is very, very visible to the public. So that we can say, no, everybody gets treated the same, you have 60 seconds. I love the visual clock idea, because it's like, yeah, 60 seconds is going. If you don't think what you have to say can fill that period of time, it's no problem. But then you have to apply to appear as a delegation, which is something else. Otherwise, 60 seconds you have, at that point, it kills the mic and you know that you're done, and we move on to the next person. That's just myself. I would still like to have an avenue for citizens to come before council, but I can always speak for myself. Yeah, please, Councillor Hoff.
Yeah, and it's funny because I agree with that in different circumstances. Like when we go to AM conference, they shut the mic, nobody can hear us. Like it's gone. Here is a little different. You know, shutting the mic off and seeing a clock, it's then how do we, you know, then we're in a position where if you've got a person who wants to continue, is that it's 60 seconds is done and then we have to face that. You know, and I've seen, and it's not, but I've seen actually, I've watched other councils have to deal with that and it can get ugly. To be honest with you, and that concerns me for the, I guess, the safety of the integrity of the meeting, the integrity of the reason for minute with council, what that can do to, you know, disrupt. You know, because I think that it's not so simple here, because you can still talk loud, you can still, you know, it's a little different. So I hear what you're saying, I agree with it, it's something that we're going to have to deal with at some point. But I guess the question then is, do we have the right personnel present during a meeting to mitigate that, I guess? And can we do that, to have it every meeting, because you don't know what's gonna happen, right? So that's what my only thoughts on that.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Race, then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would hate to take away our citizens' ability to come and speak before council. These are people who get in their car at 4 o'clock, drive to our building. As nervous as they are, they get before that mic and they tell us what they think. And because there are some times I don't appreciate what they're saying, I'm not going to stop them from saying it. So, Councillor Ryan, I agree with you. That clock might be a lifesaver for us, but I certainly do not want to take away their opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Yeah, and just one more point for myself. The way I'm sort of looking at this, I know we have concerns about what's happened in other communities. But I think as a town, understanding that we haven't had any kind of critical incidences where we've had someone make a really truly big scene. I would hate to sort of scale up our response. If we had something like that was caught on camera, and it forced us to rethink our position again, I would feel much better having that video footage to be able to say to the public, look, this is why we have to change it and remove it from our agenda. Rather than sort of jumping to, we're gonna get rid of it. Just for myself, Councillor O'Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respectfully to that, though, none of those other communities had any issues with that either until they did. And I'm not saying that Hinton's any different. I'm not saying, I think there's a bit of a flaw in thinking that we don't need to put protections around something until an incident happens. I don't feel that the citizens in Hinton are markedly different than any other citizens in any other community in Alberta, in that there isn't the ability for somebody to come and do something that's equivalent to something that was egregious in another community. If Minute with Council continues to exist as a tool for council to receive feedback from the citizens, I think there needs to be some structure put around it. I'm all for citizens being able to come and speak their mind, even if it's something that council doesn't agree with, that's fine. But I've seen instances where citizens who may not have the best motives have come before council, at Minute with Council, and I feel have intentionally weaponized the process, knowing that questions can't be answered, knowing that they can basically say most anything that they want to without being challenged. They take advantage of that and they ask questions that are leading, they ask questions that are implying, and there is no opportunity to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not true. It has happened a couple times where council has point of ordered and said, no, that's not true. I don't think that's a good habit to get into. I don't think that's productive governance. So, but without some structure around it, I think the ability is still there. I've seen citizens come in and defame administration, they've defamed council and gotten away with it, which isn't something that should be permitted or allowed. I've seen citizens flat out lie at minute with council. It's unfortunate, but it happens, and I feel without some controls around it, it could continue to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Stashik, you know, I mean, it happens when it happens, and we have to be careful of that. I think my other thing is that, and I'm gonna look at, you know, when we go to AM conferences, how many times do questions not get asked? Because they go too long, and that's people that are in that world, right? So instead of prefacing it first with the question and then the reason for it, they typically go with the reason and then miss out on the opportunity for questions. So the reason I'm saying that is because I agree with Councillor Grace that people are coming here and they're able to talk to council, but that 60 seconds to get their point across is not an easy task. And are we setting up for, you know, all of a sudden 60 seconds is gone, their clock is done, they're not done with what they want to say, and we're saying you're done. And that's what's going to potentially cause disruption, because they didn't, and it's an art to be able to sit there and get your message in 60 seconds, you know, and I'm just wondering if there's a lot of ways that they can get their message to us in different ways that's not in there, that I fear that we put parameters strictly around it, it's then setting up for those situations to occur. You know, and because I've seen with when councilors come and put forward an AM, they don't get their point across because they ran out of time, you know, and they're not prepared, and they do have a script of it. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for our citizens to get in touch with us. And, you know, this is just one of the tools, but I think it's a very limited tool that doesn't give them the opportunity to voice what they want to be heard in the way they want to be. So I personally, you know, I have some agreement with the parliamentarian. Is it productive? And I guess that's where I'm at, is I don't think it is, because it takes up a lot of time in council to hear those things. We can't respond, and then, yeah, we're 30 minutes into the meeting and it's extended our meeting now, and we've got people that are wondering why our meeting's that long and stuff like that. So I think there's just other ways that we can hear from them. So just, those are my thoughts.
I have myself up next. In hearing some of the concerns, one of the other options too, and I'm just thinking of it on the spot, so I apologize for just trying to sort of think out of the box. One of the things council used to utilize on an ongoing basis was essentially coffee with council, which happened in the half hour lead up to a meeting. And perhaps what we could do is better take that minute with council. And even if we advertise a 15-minute period before the meeting starts, where council makes sure that our goal is to make ourselves available in the front of house, so citizens can, in a sort of one-on-one capacity, engage council, or, you know, if you don't have a lot of people that night and it's one member of the public speaking to council who happens to be there, that might be a little bit more flexible to their needs, and give them an avenue to express those concerns. While sort of taking away some of the concerns that, say, Councillor Stashik and Haas mentioned. So that for myself, that might be something, but I think then it's incumbent on us to make sure that we promote that period of time as sort of taking up what minute with council was, so that we still have an interface period. That's a third way I have potentially. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, and through the chair. It would be, if we were to remove the minute with council from the procedure bylaw in our regular meetings and our committee, it would absolutely be the recommendation that we replace that engagement piece with some other mechanism that is more productive. Because this specific mechanism, while it is giving citizens an opportunity to come talk to council, it is not a particularly productive mechanism to do that, because as Councillor Stashik mentioned, there's no question and answer, there's no back and forth, and we really have no mechanism of holding people who are not members of council to the standards of council. And so that whole piece about factual information, we have no mechanism in the minute with council, and there's no real mechanism that we'll ever be able to build in where we can enforce that with just citizens. Because all of the enforcement mechanisms are for council, members of the council. So replacing that with a different mechanism for that engagement makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, and just to confirm, because I know the parliamentarian is coming next week, but it is on, whenever. Yeah, but the parliamentarian, their recommendation, from my understanding, is to go with the delegation. Is if we're going to have that opportunity, then they have what they have to follow as to, providing information and stuff like that. I think that's more reasonable. It puts accountability on the individual who's asking to be the delegate. We get the information ahead of time. We also, and I think this is where it's also important, is we have that vetted then through the agenda prep committee. Like, is this something that is valuable too, or is this, like, there's the vetting as well, that just because you apply to become a delegation doesn't mean you're instantly in there. If that's correct, if I'm, saying that, I think that's a much more effective way, and we get more information, and we get to talk to the individual. We get to ask specific questions, so I would be more in line of that than the middle council. I just don't think it doesn't provide us any, I don't think it's necessary for that meeting. I think the delegation is the way to go.
Council, there is no action on the floor currently. Councilor Sasha?
Not prepared to furnish a direction request. I have a question though. If council was of a mind to do something, an alternative engagement process, like coffee with council, is that something that would be captured in the procedure bylaw, or would that just be an informal practice that council's available to talk with citizens, maybe during the 15-minute period before each council meeting if they're available?
I have myself and then the mayor. I think for myself, I would like to see it captured in procedure, because then any current councilors, more importantly, any future councilors, could plan their sort of schedules and meetings around that. They would be fully informed that if it was a 15-minute block prior to, say, 4 o'clock, they would know that really they've, on most occasions, unless they had to be late, they need to be there at, say, 3:45. Mr. Mayor?
I actually think the CEO Panasic had a statement on that. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
CAO?
Yeah, through the chair, members of council, procedural bylaws typically are just focused on the meeting procedures. I think that it could be included either through bylaw or policy. I don't know the exact right mechanism if council wanted to do that, and that could simply be something informal that's done, or it could be something built in, say, the code of conduct that council will make an effort to attend, minute with council, or coffee with council, or some other similar engagement process, and mark it that way. But I don't know if the procedural bylaw would be the correct mechanism, but we could think about it, and there's a solution to that. I just don't have it here today.
Mr. Mayor, did you want to follow up on that?
Not really. I think the CAO pretty much hit my points. It was probably not in the procedure bylaw, but it would be something that I think we would need to do concurrently. As we remove one mechanism for engagement, we would add another with whatever the appropriate procedure is for that.
Council? Councilor Sasha?
I'll throw it out there and see what kind of committee's appetite is. I'd like to see consensus from the committee to direct, I guess, the procedure bylaw review committee to remove minute with council from scheduled council meetings and replace with an alternate citizen engagement practice. I'm never gonna be able to say that again, so.
And while Jen's capturing that, Councilor Stashik, did you care to speak to it? And then
Yeah, I'd speak to it quickly. I think having an alternate engagement mechanism might help with some of the issues that we've seen come up occasionally with council, some of the overt hostility and some of the frankly, I think sometimes minute with council is used to potentially drive an agenda that's not necessarily related to anything that's currently before council, and it winds up on the public record, and the people who are viewing video can see it, and people in the gallery are all witness to it. And I think if we have an alternative, somewhat less formal mechanism of engaging with citizens, they can still get their point to the councilors, they can still express their concerns and what they want to see, but they don't necessarily have that, public stage where they can present misinformation without any repercussions. That's my biggest concern with minute with council right now, actually, with the format of it.
Councilor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be in favor of this. And you know what? The one thing that I hear a lot is, I agree. It's council sits there, listens, we have point of order some things, as Councilor Stashik mentioned, but one of the things that I hear quite often in the public is, I don't know how you guys do it and just sit there. And that bothers me because I don't want to, like, minute with council then is not serving a purpose. And, and this gives an opportunity, okay, let's look at what other practice would be more, productive for us as council. Because quite frankly, I think, we've seen more and more AM coming forward too, and a lot of other things too, of harassment of councilors, harassment of municipal, councilors. And, and I think that unfortunately, minute council, the way it's set up right now, does get that avenue and that misinformation. So this way, I agree. I think if that platform's not given, but there's still an option, another way of getting to us and talking to us, I think is a much more reasonable way. So I'll be definitely in favor of this. What that other thing is, I don't know what that is yet, but that's where we'll have to look at what's best practices, what other communities are maybe doing. Because I am aware that other communities are starting to eliminate this as well, from their agendas and finding other options as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. For myself, I'm gonna cautiously support this right now. And I think the only thing I want to clarify is I'm not against getting rid of, I guess, the intent of minute with council. I think it's really which platform do we want to have the interface of that minute with council with their councilors? Is it before the meeting, less formally, so that people have flexibility? And so that council, and this is a big one actually, and I want to make sure that people understand this. It's not just about, well, I have a platform to go and say things at council. What's really important is giving council the chance to ask questions. And get to understand what's the opinion and what's the point of view and perspective behind what that citizen is bringing forward. I've had much better conversations in the front of the house before meeting with an individual than I have at minute with council. And so for myself, I'll support this, understanding that I think the transition to something like that is really important. But again, that'll be the work of the review committee. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be supporting this until I know what we're moving towards. We had nobody at minute with council today. Last week, I don't believe we had anybody. The last time we had somebody, I think it was the fellow who brought the rooftop sprinkler to us. When we see people at minute with council, they're there because it's a hot button topic and they want to get it off their chest. So right now, I'm not going to support this.
Councilor Stashik.
Just in regards to the direction, rather than find, I think it would be suggest alternate engagement processes, maybe. That way the review committee comes to council with some options that council can discuss. If that's the intent, or is it the intent of the review committee to just pick something and bring it in a draft?
I like this.
Okay. So, and then, yeah, I just wanted to state something that Councilman Nagoon had said earlier too about the engagement, alternative engagement processes where it's a conversation. I find conversations are much more productive. There is the ability for the citizen to, give kudos or express concerns or whatever. And if it's not fully understood, we have the opportunity to ask a question, get clarification, maybe provide an explanation, and maybe come away with a better understanding of the citizen's concern, and they might also have a better understanding of the process. When they only have the ability to come sit before us for 60 seconds and express what's on their mind without an ability to ask questions that get answered, and without ability for council to ask clarifying questions of them, that's easily managed within that time window. I think a conversation, two-way conversation is likely to be much more productive than the minute with council scenario. So thanks for that suggestion too. That's great.
Thank you, Councilor Ostashik, and I'm gonna, really being the chair, all I can ask is the potential for, say, a friendly clarification. I am wondering if Councilor Ostashik, you would consider, clarification that says, to remove, the minute with council format, before council meetings, and if I could just explain sort of my request. Is I think then what it clarifies too, and I know we certainly have a member of the media who's watching the meeting, and I'm sure it'll be a discussion point with the town, is to just really reassure the citizens, we're not looking to get rid of a chance to come before council on a Tuesday night and say, here's my concerns. What we're looking at changing is the format of what that looks like, because currently it's not as functional or as efficient as it could be.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
And then if I may, sort of just to alleviate a little bit more, what I would hope is that Councillor Race would then change her consideration, is because what we're clarifying is we're not looking to get rid of that, we're just changing the format to something that's more efficient. Councillor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So having that little session, in the foyer, you talking to somebody, having a conversation with them, or Councillor Stashik having that conversation, how does that conversation get back to all of council? So we all know what was discussed there.
As the chair, I'm gonna assume that's directed at me for clarification. It's incumbent on council to be available and make themselves available in the front of the house before a meeting. That used to be something that we did every meeting, so that our citizens were there, and it was very easy. Council could see where the action was at, what conversations were being had, and we involved ourselves in them. And they were conversations, not just getting spoken to and not having any kind of two-way dialogue. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Race?
I'm very familiar with the 15-minute session before council, and I thought it was a great thing, and it's a pity that it stopped. But my question is, the conversation that you would have with a citizen, how does that get back to all of council? When we have minute with council, all of us are receiving that, whatever that citizen has to say. But if we're having private conversations in the foyer, not all of us are privy to what's being said.
Again, in speaking to the question, it's up to a councillor during the debate that item is related to simply bring that up and to say, I had a conversation with a citizen. In the same way that we would say, I had a conversation with a citizen this past week, right? If we identify that information seems trustworthy and seems legitimate, and we want to make it part of our debate, then we bring it forward to the rest of council.
Okay, I guess what I'm referring to is people don't always come to minute with council to talk about something that's on the agenda. It might be they have a problem with bylaw, and they're addressing that with all of us in that 1 minute. So, and I just want to say, I'm not opposed to stopping Minute with Council. I just want to know what we will replace it with before I say, yes, go ahead. Let's get rid of it. Okay,
And
thank
as a
you.
final point of clarification, because that's sort of directly in line with something I spoke to, I'd like to clarify that I had said, the direction on the table does not remove Minute with Council. What it removes is the format. It changes the format of Minute with Council. And that's the thing that I wanted to emphasize. Councillor Haas.
I think CEO had. For me.
I'll go the CAO then, Councillor Haas, Councillor Ostache.
Sure, Chair. I was just going to mention one thing, and maybe it's to Councillor Race's concern, but the literature on public engagement is very much in alignment with what council's talking about. And, Councillor Race mentioned that, some people they'll get in their car, they'll come and they'll present in front of council. That is a nerve-wracking experience, and as a result, that also, not all residents are comfortable doing that. And so we are only getting a very small subset of people who may be a little bit more comfortable with that type of process. Where I would say that, when municipalities are looking at policies or to improve their public engagement, it's a migration away from those very formal and rigid structures like a Minute with Council, and it's more to having a conversation because more people in the community are going to be willing to do those types of or engage in that type of process. So it is in alignment with a lot of good practice that municipalities are moving to increase public engagement, not to stifle it.
Thanks, CAO, Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, that was just one recommendation of coffee with council as an example before. That's the whole premise, is alternate engagement processes. So this gives the opportunity to go away and the committee look at and administration work with is what are those processes, what they might look like, so that it can maybe address some of Councillor Reese's concerns of how do we get all that information. So that was just one way that we used to do things, but there may be alternatives that we're not familiar with at this point. So, that's what I want to explore. And what this does is we're not removing minimum council at all yet, but this is again, a recommendation the committee's making to seek, what information is out there. So, I'd like to, basically call this one the question as quickly as possible. I won't do that. I know Councillor Ostache has something, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas, Councillor Ostache.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief. To Councillor Race's concerns, so I still feel that something that's an informal back and forth, I shouldn't say informal, but some type of a back and forth conversation where both parties have the ability to ask questions, to give clarification, and maybe the concern is about a bylaw. And maybe it's as simple as, well, here, let me direct you to our Director of Corporate or of Emergent Protective Services? Sure. Here's his contact information. He's the best guy to be able to answer that for you. Or if it's an overarching concern with a bylaw that we haven't considered before that makes the bylaw unfair. Oh, that is a great point. I never realized that. That is something that I'm gonna bring forward as a notice of motion and get that bylaw changed, because you're correct, that's not right. We also have our council debriefs where we can talk about, during coffee with council today, I met with citizen Dave and he was telling me that his garbage isn't getting picked up, whatever the concern is. And then we all know about it. If there is something that needs to be pursued, that's another mechanism. In addition to what Councillor McGoon was saying, if it's something that's on the agenda, it can be brought up during the meeting while it's under debate. I just think that two-way conversation is just a much better venue to be able to communicate clearly ideas back and forth and maybe get a mutual understanding instead of the combative stance that's been taken a lot of times when Minute with Council has been in front of council. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostache. Council, any other discussion on this before we call it to question? Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I'll be really, really quick. So, just to clear this up for me, would we continue with minute with council and have these sessions, coffee with council prior to the meetings, just to see how that goes. And if it works, then we will not have that minute with council during the meeting. Is that what you're proposing?
I will go to the mayor and then Councilor Stashik. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. And Councilor Race, at this time with this direction from this committee, we're going to go back to the Procedure Bylaw Review Committee. And we're going to remove the minute with council from the draft bylaw that will be coming back to us. But we're also going to propose some alternative engagement options. And those are what we're gonna bring. So at this time, there is no change to our procedure bylaw based off of what we're doing here. We're just giving direction to that procedure bylaw review committee to go back, and we're gonna take the initial action of removing the minute with council as it's currently formatted and bringing suggestions for what can replace it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Councilor Stashik?
I'll withdraw, actually, the mayor, I think, spoke to it adequately. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Council, any further discussion on the direction on the floor? Consensus on the floor? Seeing none, then, we will call this to question as soon as it pops up on my screen. And we will call the question by reading that committee seek consensus to remove minute with council format before council and committee meetings and to suggest alternative engagement processes with citizens. Council, if you can please vote now. And that is carried 5-0 unanimously. Councilor Haas.
Yeah, so I'd like to make the recommendation that committee directs administration to define a standard time limit of 10 minutes for presentations and delegations in the council procedure bylaw number 1153-1. And yeah, I think that making this standard is important, because we also have to consider too, that's 10 minutes of the presentation, and then there's questions that we maybe have of council, to the presentations or delegations, so I think that's a reasonable amount of time. I guess the question, and I don't know what, and maybe it's a simple one, but it's always the budget. I would recommend though that with this, then we have something up there to indicate that 10 minutes, some sort of timer or whatever up there, so that we're fair to everybody. So, but yeah, I'm in favor of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And just to Councilor Hawes, would you be amenable to changing the word administration to the procedure bylaw review committee?
Yes, I'd be absolutely too, but thank you, is that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, while we're waiting for that to be changed, I will put I have myself in queue. I would fully support the notion that a really key part of this, as minute a detail as it is again, we have some kind of timekeeping device. Because what that doesn't do is it doesn't put the chair in a very awkward position of having to be the one who says, yeah, no, sorry, you've exceeded 10 minutes and you're done. That visual cue is really important. And again, it's transparent and it's fair, and people know, oh, I went too long, that's on me, my presentation's finished. So. Councilor Haas?
If I may, and it could be as simple as, because I know that on, there are, I don't know if they're programs or whatever, can be put up on the screen, up on there, and it can count you down, and while they're presenting even as well. So it's not something we have, it should be able to be done that way too, so.
Okay, council, the direction on the floor, that committee directs the council procedure bylaw review committee to define a standard time limit of 10 minutes for presentations and delegations in the council procedure bylaw number 1153-1. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we will call this to question. If you could please vote now. And that is also carried unanimously with 5 in favor. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, and just through the chair to committee, at this time, I think the procedure bylaw review committee has everything that's needed on this topic. The remainder of this report is really just for your information. But if there are any other questions on any of the items presented for the procedure bylaw review committee, this is a great time to ask those, or if there's any other points that council has that they'd like us to take into consideration.
Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I just have one, and it's actually come to mind over the last few weeks, and that is, I realize sometimes circumstances where councilors may not be present when an action item opens up. And I guess my thought is, and I don't know if the procedure bylaw has looked at this, but, you know, if a council member were to come in, say halfway through the debate, they're still able to vote on it. And my concern is by not being there from beginning to the end, that information may have been missed that might have what changed or whatever their vote. So I don't know if the procedure bylaw committee is looked at, but because the way I read it currently right now, when you're present, you can vote, but would it be something to consider that you are present when that item opens? And able to vote on when that item is open, and if not, then, you know, not voting, even hearing, but, so I don't know what, when the CCO has their hand up, so, but that's just a question for me to the procedure bylaw committee, if that was considered, but.
CAO.
Through the chair to members of council, so what you're talking about is all regulated through the NGA based on the abstention sections that dictate when a councillor can and cannot abstain. There are situations where if you come halfway through, that you have the option to abstain from a vote.
Right.
But those are fairly tightly regulated through the Municipal Government Act.
Okay, so it's, to clarify then, so it's not necessarily you have to abstain, it's a decision of the individual to whether they abstain or not.
In some cases, it's very, there's, you know, through the Municipal Government Act, they actually dictate specific circumstances where you have the option to, certain circumstances where you must, and then with most circumstances, council doesn't have the option to abstain. So, but that is all regulated through the Municipal Government Act. I could send some council some information on those sections if you'd like.
Fair enough, I appreciate that, I'm aware of that, so, but, okay, thank you.
Council, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question regarding the third recommended action. I know it's not something we need to address. I'm just wondering, does that represent a change? Because I thought that pretty much that exact wording was already in the procedure bylaw.
So to Councillor Stashik, it does not represent a change. That is our wording in the bylaw. What you'll see in the report, if you read the last question that went to the parliamentarian, we'll see the answer about how that is meant to be handled. The question that came up in committee was, how do we call a meeting to order and then adjourn it without quorum? The answer is in this report. We didn't have the answer. Now everyone has it. But that's why we didn't need to take any action on that.
Okay, thank you.
Council, Councillor Race.
Just a quick comment. Last year I spoke to the parliamentarian about this, and I just want to thank committee and CAO in regards to him coming to our town. He was quite eager to come and present, so I'm very happy to hear that he's coming out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, anything else on this action item before we look to move on? Seeing none, we will move on to action item 5.6, fees, rates, and charges bylaw number 2001, presented by Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you, Chair, and through the rest of committee. So before you this evening is your first glance of the consolidated fees and charges bylaw. If you recall, it was written in the tactical plan for 2022-2026 for the town to adopt a comprehensive fees and charges schedule. We are taking this opportunity to bring the first draft of this forward in alignment with the fire rescue bylaw to number 2000, which was at a committee meeting prior to this one. The fees are listed. You will see as we develop and bring more fees into this, some slight cosmetic changes, because our lens is going to be on ultimate readability, and some of the different fees from the departments may require a slightly different tweak to it. With that, myself and my colleague, Ms. McDougall, is here for any questions.
Council, any questions on any of this? Councillor Hawes.
So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this question at this point, but we are looking at fees. And I was gonna ask it if it's not, but I'm just curious about false alarms. Do we actually charge people with these false alarms? Because I understand there's quite a few false alarms that happen in our community. And I see that there is, you know, a warning on the first one, but then some substantial fines with future ones. Is that something we practice?
To Chair, it is something that we should be doing it in practice, but we haven't been. There is a difference, and it's outlined in the new fire bylaw very clearly. There's a difference between a false alarm and an accidental activation. An accidental activation is there was smoke present, or a child at the store pulled an alarm, or a kid at the school pulled an alarm. We treat those as actual fires. They're not false alarms. Those are actual alarms. A false alarm is when there's been a mechanical failure and that the system didn't alert the way it's designed to alert.
Right.
If it alerts the way it's designed to alert, that's an alarm. That's actually called a catalog alarm, or it's an actual fire until we determine it's not a fire.
So what do we normally get, if I may?
We would get a lot of what is our dispatch center calls false alarm, but is actually an accidental activation. We get alarms at, for example, at the hotel, somebody burns toast in the morning, the alarm goes off.
Right.
The system did what it's designed to do. It detected smoke, set off an alarm, and alerted the fire department. So that's not a false alarm.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Council, any questions or potential directions based on the report? Councillor Stashik?
Mr. Chair, if there's no questions, I would make the recommended action.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Give that a second, council, to pop up, but while that's happening, I'll just double check. Any further questions or discussion on the recommended referral? Seeing none, I will call to question by reading it one last time. That committee refers the draft fees, rates, and charges by law number 2001 to a future regular meeting of council. Council, all those in favor or against, if you can please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Any further discussion or directions stemming from that? Seeing none, that does bring us to council reporting, boards and committees of council, and I will start with Councillor Race on the screen. Councillor Race?
Thank you, sir. Nothing to report.
Councillor Race, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. This past week, I attended the Attraction and Retention Committee of Hinton's Strategic Planning Session. This is an organization that council has funded to attract and retain healthcare workers. I can report that the board is now fully up and running, fully staffed, and coming out of the strategic planning session, there's a number of events that the committee will be partaking in, specifically to attract healthcare practitioners. But one item of note for council is on Thursday, September 12th, there's going to be a healthcare barbecue event at the hospital put on by Arch, and that's going to be at lunch hour, 11 to 1 probably. And all council will be invited to come take part and thank our healthcare practitioners here in town. That is all I have today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Update, I attended our ASH meeting. All business as usual there, and The other thing I had was the library board meeting last night, and just, want to share a heads up that in October, the week of Thanksgiving, the library is going to be closed for that week. Reason being is because, we are doing a facelift, and a lot of new, structures are being, replaced. So we'll be removing them, and staff are also gonna take advantage of cleaning up and doing some cataloging and all the different things that they can get ahead of the game on. So, yeah, so that'll be posted and communicated to the public. But it'll be, the week of, I believe, 13th to the 17th, something like that Thanksgiving week there. Other than that, that's all I had to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillor Ostash.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostash. For myself, I'm just gonna pick up on a thread that's gained a lot of traction in the last 24 hours. And it's worth noting it in the hopes that our friends in the media or anybody watching will help disseminate good information. There's been a lot of discussion about water rates and utilities and how that might potentially impact citizens. So some things that I've seen specifically misinformed about online is, number one, nothing's been passed at this point by council. And there's been, for whatever reason, an uptake to think that there's already been bylaws or subsequent charges have been passed by council. That hasn't happened yet. The communication piece from the town of Hinton is to inform citizens that it's coming up as part of our regular budget discussions, but it's perhaps something to take note of. The other piece of information that's really important to tackle is widespread note that the town of Hinton has not put any money away as it pertains to water treatment center. That's actually something that's been in the works, and we've been putting money, dedicated money, for capital expenditures into a reserve fund for quite a long time now. Because this is very new, I don't have the figures with me, and I don't want to put admin on the spot. I don't think it's fair, and I don't think they could just rattle off a reserve fund totaling awesome, but that's not expected. But it's important for citizens to know that's just factually not true. This is material that the town of Hinton has had the eye on for years, and actually had been debated in regular council chambers as being important, and we would be dedicating funds to it over the long term. So again, it's just important to battle misinformation. And that's all I have. And we will go to the CAO. Sorry, Councillor Race.
I've already spoken to this, so I had nothing to report.
Oh, okay. CAO, administrative reporting status.
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing to report.
Okay, council, any questions for the CAO before we move on to action item 7? Seeing none, then, Mr. Mayor?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you very much. Council, any discussion on that? Seeing none, as soon as it comes up. There we go. Council, that council adjourned the meeting at 6:58. We'll call a question. If you could please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. We are adjourned at 6:58 PM. Thank you very much.